The
show must go on.
It always does and always will, at least as far as Masculine Geek is concerned. And speaking of which, we are now live. Welcome, everyone, to one of the best shows on the internet, Masculine Geek. Welcome to your wonderful Wednesday evening. Once again, it is that time, 9 p.m. Eastern. We are Masculine Geek number 54, and we have with us a very special guest, Mr. Troy Francis, a prolific writer, master of all things women and game, and a snappy dresser who's putting us all to shame.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. And once again, thank you for staying up late or getting up early. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Absolutely. It's 2 a.m. in London, which is why I'm wearing these sunglasses, because it's kind of like I had a look in the mirror and I thought, God, that's looking a little bit on the puffy side. But also, I think I quite like the look. I think it's working. So we'll leave them for the time being.
I like it. All right, excellent. Everyone in the chat, howdy, welcome. It's good to see you all. And so let's get started. So you are a prolific writer. You are. Would you categorize yourself as a pickup artist or a dating coach, or how would you title yourself?
Well, I normally say dating coach these days. I mean, pickup artist, I think, is just it's a bit early 2000s, isn't it? It's a bit okay boomer now, probably, to say that. And,
we were just talking about that. Yes,
it's just tainted in various ways. I mean, all I ever really wanted to do was write books, to be honest. And I kind of got into the whole PUA game thing just by sheer dint of having a massive, sex drive and wanting to find out how to meet lots of different girls. So I did all of that kind of stuff. Then I ended up writing articles about it, and then I wrote some books and everything else. And now I do work with guys. I do coaching with guys and so on. But it's not my main focus. I try to keep that reasonably limited because I want to have more time to write and to create other products, basically. So.
Gotcha. Okay. We're definitely worthwhile. Now, Rob and TJ and I always say that every man, and fundamentally, there's that word again, TJ, fundamentally, every man
hey, not for nothing,
and let him burn, is a secret geek or comes from a very geeky background that he's either maybe pushed aside as he's gotten older, or he's forgotten about, or just is not ashamed, but he has other interests, but that's still there. And that's part of the mischievous boy, the adventuresome mischievous boy about him. Yeah. Now, there's a geek in you too. I know it. Completely. You almost seem to me like a Tolkien geek or a literature nerd. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just my take. And I know you've mentioned before in past podcasts that you have a fiction interest in writing fiction.
Well, 100%. I mean, I'm a complete reading geek, complete literature geek, complete fiction geek. I mean, in terms of things like Tolkien, I read The Hobbit when I was a kid. And then I started on Lord of the Rings, and I was just like, oh, God, I couldn't get through Lord of the Rings at that time because it was just too much of a doorstopper. It was too dense. But, I used to love Star Wars and everything like that when I was a kid. I used to like a bit of Star Trek and so on. So I think that side of you never really goes away. But the big thing for me really is reading. I was always a very geeky, nerdy kid who was just spent the whole time reading and writing and, quite introverted really in many ways. And I suppose a lot of the dating coach stuff has just been my attempt to escape from that identity and be somebody else, to be that party guy kind of thing. But no, really, I mean, my natural inclination is certainly towards just sitting on my own in a room reading a book, to be honest.
Responding very quick. All right, so I'm not pulling myself away from our guest here. Everyone in the chat, thank you for the birthday wishes. I appreciate that. And so let me put in there. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for the birthday wishes. I appreciate that. It's not a huge deal, but I do appreciate it.
Yeah, he just turned 50.
For fuck's sake, I did, and you all wish you could look this fucking good.
No joke. When I first met Vince, I thought he was in his early 40s, late 30s.
Yes, there's a.
Whereas Aaron, I thought he was 70, about to die.
Yes, right. There's a. I'll give you a quick tip for remaining ageless. Number one, make sure you don't have to eat don't eat too much crap. You still eat good. Whatever you want. I eat pretty much whatever I want. Exercise. Okay, at least 3 to 4 times a week. Get your heart rate up. Lift. Do that. As far as your skin and whatnot's concerned, and like wrinkles and shit, number one, cold water, not warm. Don't use cold shower. Well, I never got into the cold shower thing too much. I'll do I know, right? I'll do cool. I know the people out there are like losing their minds over this, but cool showers. Cool showers. Don't use soap, and don't rub your face with your washcloth. Pat your face dry. There you go. So that's just the tip counts, Bull Rush. The tip counts.
Wow.
So let's get back then. Exactly. That's it. So you grew up on Tolkien. How about Dungeons and Dragons wise and role playing games and things of that nature? Did you delve into any of that or no?
I have to admit that I didn't really. That was slightly a bridge too far, even for me. But I mean, I certainly wasn't, one of the jocks. I certainly wasn't one of the popular kids or anything like that by any stretch. But there were some kids who were into Dungeons and Dragons, and even for me, I was a little bit like, I didn't quite go there. But I don't know, man. Saying that, I was in a bar the other day. I was in a pub the other day in London, and there was a group of people doing a role playing game next to us. It was really, really bizarre. And they seemed to be having an amazing time, and I just sort of thought, God, I could see how. I kind of wish I'd have got into that. I can see how doing that would have been pretty cool, So, so yeah, that was sort of where I was with it, really.
Okay. So not too much with the role playing games, but heavy into the literature and the fantasy.
I mean, yeah, I think I've always been quite introverted, really. So even the degree of socialization that you require to ace it in the group of Dungeons and Dragons kids, I found it was a step above me, to be honest. I much prefer just sort of like being on my own and doing my own thing, really.
Yeah. Now, when did that start to be? I don't want to say like a detriment, but you found that being the strict introvert wasn't working for you.
Well, I mean, it didn't really work throughout all of my teens, right up until about the age of 20. In the sense that, I mean, it was all right. I got through. I didn't sort of fall off the planet or anything, but I certainly didn't have any dating life to speak of. I certainly didn't have any traction with girls or any sort of understanding of what it took to to be attractive to girls or anything like that. And of course, as we know, I mean, that sort of takes up a disproportionately large amount of headspace, doesn't it? Particularly when you're that age. And so,
absolutely.
So yeah, I got nice pussy. Nice pussy, very well. So
he's got to make his appearance.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it was pretty tough, and I got very depressed and everything else because the other thing was as well, I didn't understand what we now come to term the red pill. So I didn't really kind of understand how relationships work, how psychology works, how female psychology works. So yeah, I was in a pretty bad space, for much of my late teens, really, into my early 20s.
Okay. And you mentioned the pulling yourself out of the introverted state, as it were, when you started to get a little bit better and understanding women better. What was it? At what point did that come about? And was there a defining aha moment, or was it gradual?
Well, it's kind of weird, really, because what happened was I went to university in Manchester in England. So I live in the I lived in the south of England, kind of near London, and then I went somewhere totally different. I went up north, which is all very, very, very scary and different for us here because we've got this big north-south divide, even though it's like a small country. So I went up north for the first time to Manchester, which was this really cool city where there was a lot of clubs and partying going on, and a lot of music came from there. People like the Smiths, Morrissey. Who else? Oh, I don't know. Stone Roses. Like there was a big scene there at the time, and so I went up there to go to university, and I basically got immediately sucked into the club sort of partying scene because I'd always been obsessed with. I loved the music, even though I was a geek. I loved the music, So I got sucked into sort of going out and partying, and unfortunately, I got into sort of a lot of drinking, and I got into some quite naughty other stuff as well. And I wouldn't recommend that to anybody because it's not a self-improvement tool. It's not a way to go. And I had to then repair quite a lot of damage after that. But what it did do on the plus side was it kind of blew open the doors of my perception. Do you know what I mean? Like suddenly I went from being this, like I said, very introverted, serious kind of kid to being, well, actually, fuck it. And becoming quite sort of what they call degenerate, on Twitter now. So
you went the opposite end.
Yeah, I kind of went exactly to the opposite extreme. And it happened very quickly as well. It happened almost overnight. And as soon as I started to be like that, what I found was that people started to react differently to me, and girls in particular started to react differently to me. So the persona was sort of not fake, but it was kind of it wasn't necessarily my natural inclination, but it suddenly drew people in, and I learned so much from that. Albeit the way that it happened was not particularly like healthy. Like I say, I wouldn't recommend that people go to Manchester and do a load of substances and things. But that's just how it was, and it taught me a lot of lessons about how your reality is very much shaped by your perception, and you can alter that. So that was really powerful for me.
Okay, so that's not something you'd recommend, but that was your journey that totally worked out for you.
Yeah, I mean, then I had to sort of tone it back because I was pretty messed up. I mean, like I'd had sort of stuff happening in my family background in terms of, my parents were divorced when I was younger. I'd had a stepmother and all this kind of thing. And so I come from this quite sort of background where things weren't necessarily that stable. And then I got straight into this like partying kind of mode and poured a load of like alcohol on top of it. And it's a very heady combination for a young person, and it's like I say, it's certainly not something I'd recommend, but it just sort of like, I think sometimes what people need to find, if they are stuck in themselves, if they're stuck in that sort of introverted lack of ability to socialize, sometimes you need to find other ways just to blow everything open. You need to shift your perspective radically, and that's kind of what happened for me, albeit in a way that was like a less than ideal.
Gotcha. Now, the introversion too. That was almost like maybe not direct response, but maybe a survival technique, as it were. Talking about your childhood.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I don't want to go into sort of massive details, but then my dad remarried, and I had a stepmother, and myself and my sister didn't get on particularly well with the stepmother, and it was it was up and down, let's say, but there was quite a lot of down, and
Gotcha.
Sometimes in those situations you sort of you have to act a certain way, or the kid feels they have to act a certain way to not attract attention to themselves. I was listening to somebody else about this, actually, a non-manosphere kind of podcast about this coincidentally the other day, and they were basically saying this thing. They were saying the way the personality is formed is that sometimes it's in response to obviously we know it's in response to childhood, right? But if you've got a very domineering sort of parental figure, then sometimes the kid will do anything they can to avoid being seen. They're just to protect themselves. They're like, right, I'm just going to be very quiet, very insular, so that I don't get seen, I don't get into trouble. And I suspect that was kind of in part what was happening to me, although also I was always kind of like that, to be honest. I always liked my own company. I always liked being solitary, but I think it made it worse after after what happened in the family.
Gotcha. Okay. I can relate. I've always been a bit introverted myself, just burying my head in books, reading, escaping into role-playing games and things like that in my late teens, early 20s. So
kind of the same here.
Yeah, you too, TJ. How about you, Rob? Was that part of your childhood makeup or no?
Nope.
Rob's like, fuck that shit.
I mean, I did my fair share.
I'm shocked. The gambling.
All right.
I did my fair share of reading, but I've never considered myself an introvert, and so what you're talking about, I can sympathize, I guess, or empathize, but it's not been my reality.
The thing to understand about an introvert is the difference between them and an extrovert. Introverts have to be alone to recharge their energy levals, whereas extroverts feed off of other people's energy, so they have to be around people. Introverts can be around people for a while, but then they got to go be by themselves and like just kind of like they need their fortress of solitude.
Absolutely. Now, what do you think about the? I've heard this term before, ambivert, which is sort of like not a balance, but like a flow between the two states. Does that make sense to you guys? Is that
I would kind of. Some people have described me as kind of a combination of both. Sometimes I'll be the life of the party. Sometimes I'll be just sitting in the corner with my drink, and or I'll be like, I'm gonna go home. So I think that it really depends on what mood we're in, almost. Or at least that was for me. But there's sometimes where I don't mind spending a whole weekend just watching Cowboy Bebop and reading books. Exactly. But then there's sometimes where it's like I got to go get out. I'm getting cabin fever.
Oh yeah, no, I'm the same way. I do sometimes do some of my writing with my headphones on, listening to music, surrounded by people, and just using that energy. Do you find you do that too, Troy? Do you now for writing? Do you do that solitary? Is that a solitary activity for?
Bit of both, to be honest. I mean, like I do quite like. I feel like I can get really into a project if I'm just sitting at home, to be honest, and there's no distractions at all. But I do like to go to cafes and stuff as well. I do because this is the thing, like what you guys were just saying. It's not clear cut. I mean, I do quite like to be out and around people. Like I do like the sort of buzz you get from that, and sometimes just going to the cafe, sitting down, plugging the laptop in, being aware of the people around, but sort of focusing in on your own thing, that can be really good. It sort of depends where I am in a project, to be honest.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I like a bit of both these days.
Okay. I know for myself, I like writing with the swirl of humanity around me, but if I'm editing and I really have to I need to edit this shit. I need quiet for that. Is that you?
That's true. Because particularly like if you're doing a first draft of something, for example, then it doesn't probably matter that much where you are because you just need to get the words out. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes just having people around you is good for that. You can feel that energy. You're just getting the words out. It doesn't really matter how good it is. It doesn't really matter like how well structured it is or anything else. But then, like you say, when you need to then sit down and get it into order, when you need to do the editing, you probably do need some sort of privacy and quiet for that because you are, that's the more surgical, precise part of it, isn't it?
No, that's true. That's true. How about yourself, Rob, as far as when you're doing your essays and you're writing, do you do that out and about, or is that you have to sit at your desk and be silent, just have your pussy in your lap and your drink and
just rubbing your pussy,
rubbing your pussy,
stroking my pussy
meditatively?
Yes,
that's right. Well, when I write, I typically do it at my desk or sitting here at my laptop, and it's more out of habit than anything. It's my routine.
Yeah.
But could I do it with a bunch of people around? Probably. But I typically, I'll pound it out and hit send and call it good.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I think it just varies for me, really. But certainly, I mean, here's the other thing, right? I've always lived in big cities. I've always chosen to live in big cities. I've never done the sort of rouge going to live in a cabin in the woods type thing.
No, I'm doing that.
TJ's living that now.
Whereabouts are you, TJ?
I live in the dead center of Washington State in the Cascades. So,
right, okay,
think of like higher elevation Ireland.
That's
what it's like over here. But I actually don't live in the middle of nowhere. I live just off of a state highway, so it's not like I'm not doing the whole Ted Kaczynski thing.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Oh, and TJ, you owe us all a dog.
Yeah.
Okay. Whoa. That dog had a hold put on it.
Was it
Here we go. Here's the rationalizations and excuses. The hamster's spinning.
What is this? Layaway at the shelter?
The next morning, I went out to get the dog, and they said like a hold had been put on it, so I couldn't get the dog.
Gosh.
And that's how Dude, dogs. I mean, you also have to understand. Really quickly, Pacific Northwest. This is like fur baby land, right? So the dog had been picked up from a couple from Seattle. Literally drove that morning to Wenatchee to go pick up the dog, which is 3 hours away or whatever.
They really wanted that dog, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just, I mean, I don't blame him. It was one of the most disciplined dogs I've ever seen. But the fur baby craze here, it's like it's here, you know. So if you want a good dog at a humane society, you better be willing to kill for it.
Wow.
Apparently, yeah. Just drive over land for hours wearing a diaper to get your dog. Jesus.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. That's how they are.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy around here where I am actually in London. I'm in a fairly affluent sort of like little place in the south of London, and it's crazy the number of dogs around here. They've got it's that whole thing. Everyone's sort of like they're trying to make it like a mini New York. You know, everyone goes out and gets their frappuccino and has the dogs. And it's all very lifestyle. You know, it's that sort of vibe around just where I am. Where I happen to be sort of geographically at the moment, it's just very like.
Gotcha. Now, do you see the women with the little pouch with the little like what I like to call a shake and piss dog, like a little rat?
Yeah, all of that. They're carrying them in their handbags and stuff. Yeah, definitely. But it's the other thing about this particular area where I am. It's very yummy mummy as well. This is what I don't know if you guys have that expression.
What's that?
Yummy mummy, which is basically mums, youngish mothers. Like people come and sort of. Young professionals, they set up families. So you got all these kind of like so-called yummy mummies as well, and it's all very like
a MILF.
It's all very it's all very Sex in the City, but post the kids. So they're all going to meet up for brunches and all this kind of shit.
Also, it's Karen saying she wants to meet the manager. She wants to talk to the manager.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
That's so yeah. Yeah, it's all part of this. Like, it's all a lifestyle thing, isn't it? Really.
Absolutely. I mean, and you're surrounded 24/7 by women, so it's.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, what I was going to say was on that whole introvert thing and stuff. I've always chosen to live in like big cities. You know, like I've never really. So as much as I say that, the reality of it is I definitely want to be around people. I just don't want them to come too close, which is psychologically probably quite revealing. But you know what I'm saying? It's like
you want to know that they're there, and if you want to go to it, you can, and you retreat. Okay, I totally get that. Yep.
Yeah, I like the buzz of it around me, but I don't necessarily want to. I don't know.
Gotcha. No, I get it. I like. Yeah. I think the whole idea of the hermit in the woods is a nice romantic fantasy, but honestly, I couldn't do that. There's just no way.
Well, I mean, even back, the reality is there's no hermit who lived alone. They always had someone taking care of them or bringing them food or whatever. You can't. The idea of a lone wolf is just a.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's I mean, some guys just like think of that like it would be nice to go off. And just like be apart.
I think the problem is that they think of it at the moment, but they don't think, okay, after 3 months, a year.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Like we can't all
be crazy after a while.
Yeah. Well, you and for me, because I have those tendencies as well, where I just want to go out and live in the middle of nowhere and just be alone. But then the fear is I'm missing out on life. There's stuff going on that I could be a part of that I'm not a part of because I'm out hiding. And how would I know that's kind of stuff's going on? And so I think that's actually one of my biggest fears personally is the idea that I'm missing out on stuff that's going on. That if I just got outside my comfort zone, I could actually experience. But
outside of your bagel,
outside.
Get outside your bagel.
Outside of your bagel, but outside of your comfort zone. And I think that's honestly what it is for most people. It's just their comfort zone is something else other than, what it's for their own personal thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether it's, going to events or going to social gatherings or whatever it is that people are just not used to or they don't like. But yeah.
And Troy Bullrush has a question for you. I put that up on the screen.
Yeah. How does he sees the societal relationship between men and women developing over the next decade? Well, I mean, it's not going to get any easier, is it? I think is the key thing. I mean, I think even in the last 10, 15 years, we've just seen such a radical shift in terms of the way that people interrelate, the way that people get together to date. And obviously that's all been driven by technology. So the likes of Tinder, obviously Instagram is a massive deal now, et cetera, et cetera. So and you've got this now global sexual marketplace, if you like, global dating marketplace, whereby you can have a girl in a small village in Siberia and she's getting hit up over message on Instagram by some dude in Dubai, and then he flies her over, and so we've had this real sort of distortion of the dating marketplace, the sexual marketplace, in a way that we've just never seen before in the whole history of humanity, and that's something that guys are trying to come to terms with at the moment, and it's reflected in how you do game, or how you dating advice and so on. But I think the bad or the good news is that it's not going to get any easier. I mean, or it's not going to get any less complicated. All that's going to happen is we're going to get more and more connectivity. There's probably going to be more and more information about each other available. And it's hard to say exactly where that's going to take us. But I think that whatever we're seeing now, in terms of people will talk about, the top 20% of guys getting the attention of the 80% of women and that kind of thing. I think whatever we're seeing now, I can only see being amplified as we go forward. I can only see the pressures becoming more, becoming harder, and the complexities getting more as we go on. So and I've just actually done this video product where I talk about this in detail. And I think the only way forward for guys really is self-improvement. The only way forward, unfortunately, is doing the work, as Rich Cooper says, and then making yourself the best you can be, because you've got to stand out in this dating marketplace if you want the attention of women, with with some of with all of the world's chads, basically. I mean, that's the reality, because if you're on Instagram, she's on Instagram, you're not just competing with the guy from the baker down the road, or the bloke who works in the pub. You're competing with some guy in Miami who's got his own yacht, So how do we confront that reality? Well, the only thing you can do is find ways to stand out through the way that you project your personality, and through other techniques, and also do self-improvement. So be the best version of yourself you can possibly be.
Real quick, too, there was a question earlier by Ben Jones. He said, "Hey, Troy and other guys, what is your feeling about Christian women? I recently reconnected with my faith. Red pill knowledge is helping me to filter, but what say you guys?"
And he added to that too.
Yes, he did.
Which is right there.
The only real marriages I've seen are between religious people. Are religious people at last? But I know Troy hates the trads. Well, no, I love trads.
You are a damn degenerate, Troy.
Well, define trads. I mean, I was having this discussion with Vince privately, but my definition of a degenerate now is a man who tells another man, "I gotta ask the boss's permission first before going to the bar or going doing anything." I mean, how is that not degeneracy? From imagine telling a Roman patrician from 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, that you're going to go ask your wife's permission to go do some basic thing in life.
Well, the whole thing about degeneracy, it's a moral conundrum. I mean,
it's morally subjective. It's
completely subjective. Yeah. Back in the 50s and 60s, you had congressional commissions and the Postmaster General looking into pornographic writing. I mean, there's certain things that all of us write today we could not get away with 50, 60 years ago.
Right?
Wouldn't you would go to jail. You would be arrested. Well,
but I guess the problem is that a lot of the guys that what passes for trad now is just what was okay 20 years ago, but or is just, to me, is repugnant and would have been repugnant to guys 50 years ago. But
bottom line is you can't go backwards. That's just how it is. You can't go backwards.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would agree with that. You just cannot. I mean, we have to. I know Rollo said this before. Troy even mentioned this. Our technology is so fast that our psychosexual evolution cannot keep up with it. So we're starting to see the results of that now.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I say at the beginning of this video thing that I've been making, it will never be. It's now harder for guys in the sexual marketplace than it's ever been before. But it's also the easiest that it will ever be again, because you know, as I say, all we're going to see is an acceleration of technology. I don't believe that we're going to see any sort of big. I mean, maybe we will, but I can't really see any massive societal shifts at the moment that's going to bring back the patriarchy or any of that kind of stuff. So I think all we're going to see is an amplification of what we've already seen, whether you like it or not. And this is my argument with the trans. I mean, like this whole thing about trans. I mean, to be honest, I don't really care if a guy wants to get married and have 10 kids and go and live in Montana or whatever. I mean, that's fine. That's up to you. I'm more libertarian. I'm just like live and let live. You want to do that? That's absolutely fine. I don't really care, to be honest.
Exactly.
But I think what annoys me about it, particularly on something like Twitter, is when you've got all these dudes who are basically want to turn the clock back on 10, 15 years worth of shared notes about the realities of relationships, and basically say no, all of that stuff doesn't count. You know, divorces happen, and sometimes women cheat, but you know, you've just got to find a good, high quality woman, and you'll be fine. And I suppose
you can't put the blinders back on.
Exactly, but that's what these guys want to do, or they'll play these like weird mental sort of masturbatory games and sort of say, oh yeah, well that might count for that kind of stuff that you're talking about. That might be the case for broken women, but when you find a high quality woman, when you find a high quality woman, you know, everything will be fine. So all you've got to do is self-actualize. You know,
yeah, right.
Be the best, inappropriately placed.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Be the best you can be, and then you'll attract that high quality woman, and then everything will be fine, and she'll be faithful. You'll never divorce, and you know it'll all be wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, just to go back to his question about Christian women, I mean, to be honest, for some reason I don't come into contact with many Christian women, but you know, look, I mean, my human nature is human nature, right? And this is the other big thing about these guys online, and Twitter's the worst for this, really. I think the thing about Twitter, it's meant to be its USP, is it's this interactive medium, and that's the thing that I hate the most about it, because you get all these idiots coming on and just like interjecting their stupid views into everything. But yeah, I mean, there's this Madonna whore idea, isn't there? This Madonna whore delusion. And it's very persistent amongst guys, and it won't go away. And basically, a lot of these trads have this in different, and they express it in different ways. But what it basically comes down to is they'll say things like, well, and somebody did say this the other day. Somebody tweeted this the other day. They'll say, well, players shouldn't congratulate themselves on their prowess with women because all they're doing is passing around the same few broken women. And the idea is there are these broken, supposedly so-called broken women who are promiscuous and who are sleeping with all of the chads and everything else.
And thank God for them.
Yeah, exactly. And where are they? And
right.
Send them my way.
So you've got that pool of women, but then you've got this other pool of women who are somehow different, who are these good, high-quality women. And that just seems to me to be a profound misunderstanding of human nature, because, of course, the truth is that we're all multifarious, aren't we? You know, we've all got bad sides, we've all got good sides. You know, I can be good in certain situations, not very frequently, of course, but you know, it's possible.
Mary's watching.
Exactly, and I can be, you know, and I can do degenerate things, and that is the case for women as well. You know, women are. It depends on the circumstances. It depends on her time of life. It depends on the temptations that have been put in front of her. So this sort of thing of like, oh well, just find a good girl and then everything will be fine, just is just a nonsense. And it's,
I think that's the real issue that I personally have from coming from that background is they give you all this like what you should do, but there's no in this environment, it's kind of like someone saying you should go off to war, but when you come back with a missing leg and arm, we're not going to look out for you. Right. Go fight for our country. Go die in this war that you don't understand. When you come back, you know, sucks to be you. Sucks that you stepped on a mine. Sucks that an 88 blew off your arm. Sucks that a sniper shot you in the gut, you know, and all that stuff. And so, you know, if a guy said, if a man said, I want you to marry my daughter, and if she tries to walk out on you, I'll have your back for no good reason, you know, no fault type thing, I'll have your back. That's one thing. But if it's just some random guy online saying you should make the biggest risk that you'll ever make in your life, just because I said so, and if it falls through, I'm going to just wash my hands and absolve myself. It's like, you know, this is why I would never, it's kind of like why I would never advise a guy to do something that maybe I do, but I would never advise someone else to do because it's so risky. And I'm not going to take responsibility for it if it falls flat on him, you know, like there's stuff like the way I live my life, what I do with my life, it turned out well, and it was a risk, but it worked out, but it hasn't worked out for other people. So I wouldn't tell someone else to do it unless I was willing to, you know, help them out if they screwed up. But most of these guys are not doing that. They're doing this whole thing where they're saying, go run across no man's land, and suffer. But, you know, it's like, are you the guy who's going to let me sleep on your couch or bail me out when the divorce comes and all that other stuff? Or at least be honest about what's going on, because, and Rob said this before, and it's the truth. When you get legally married, the state is the head of the household.
State's the patriarch.
So unless you are willing to go all the way, like guns and iron type thing, you know, most men are not willing to do that. I can see it both ways, but that's my own type thing. Then you're not the head of the household. The state is. And unless you're in an area where the sheriff's going to have your back, but it's more of a circumstantial type thing. So,
yeah, that's very true. And I mean, the statistics on divorce and everything tell their own story. And clearly, I don't personally, as somebody making content, I don't go much into sort of the mechanics of divorce and the divorce industry and all that. Partly because I haven't experienced it, because I've never been married, but you know, also because it's just I don't go in. That's just not my subject area. But look, let's be real. Particularly if you're in the United States or well, the UK is pretty bad as well. In other countries, you know, the divorce laws are clearly not favourable to guys. We're looking at a global divorce rate of about 50%. I mean, in some places it's higher. Surprisingly, in the Eastern European countries and places like Russia, the divorce rate, well, I'm not sure about Russia, but places like Hungary and things like very traditional sort of society.
It's lower, isn't it?
No, some of those places it's quite high.
Really?
Actually. Some of them it's touching 60%, and you kind of.
Wow.
And I've dated like Russian girls, and I was talking to a Russian girl that
I too like to live dangerously.
I was talking to this Russian girl about it, and I asked her why it would be that the divorce rate actually in Russia is quite high, and she said, well, you know, people get married when they're fairly young because that's what is societally accepted, and then they split up when they realize that, you know, marriage is not what it's all cracked up to be. And I mean, look, we're fighting fundamentals of human nature, which is that. Is monogamy genuine or not? Well, is monogamy natural or not? I don't have a definitive answer to that. But one thing I do know is that human beings like variety, and human beings get bored after a period of time. That's just the reality. And if you don't have a social structure that's forcing you to stay to married to somebody, otherwise you're going to die or you're going to get, you know, rejected from the tribe. Then what is there really that's holding people together? You know, you go into the marriage and just think, well, gee, shucks, I hope, you know, fingers crossed that she doesn't. You know, stop feeling the tingles at somewhere down the line and choose to just go off with Chad and take half my money. It literally is. You know, you're relying on, you know, somebody else going along with the program. And as much as you vet or whatever, how can you be fully sure that another human being in 10, 15, 25 years time isn't going to suddenly decide, actually, I'm kind of not feeling this anymore?
Yeah,
you know,
that's completely reasonable too. I mean,
no, I would say that the environment is actually more important than the girl. Like,
that's true.
You can get a girl who would actually, in modern sense, would not be very loyal. But if there's enough social pressure, they're like, you know, I mean, there is going to be the unicorn out there somewhere among the pale blue light, whatever you want to say, that is going to remain loyal regardless. And, you know, if you happen to be that guy, you know, congratulations, you won the lottery. But that's the kind of the odds that you're playing with.
Well,
For the rest of the guys, it's like, yeah, like the girl's great, but everything around her, her friends, her family, my family, is going to be encouraging her to be true to herself, which means taking me to the cleaners if, you know, for one reason or another, she's not happy, you know? That's more important than with the girl. Like you were saying, you can vet all you want, but character matters, but environment also matters, because that's what shapes a lot of people more than they want to admit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a long timeline as well. I mean, it's all very well. I'm sure that we've all met and dated girls, and they're great people, and they seem very nice, and they seem very caring, and they seem to have, you know, certain values and things. But it's like, I mean, how long is the vetting process going to be? I mean, but even if you've known her for a decade, the point is that the pressures will continue, and they'll continue over a long term. So last week, I overheard, or I was privy to 2 conversations with 2 separate women, both of whom were saying that they'd been married for about 25 years and they'd gone and had affairs. And I think one of them had, you know, she was in the process of the divorce with her husband. The other one, I think they were still together, but obviously it had caused, you know, massive problems in that marriage or whatever. So, and presumably those dudes, when they married these women 25 years ago, like a quarter of a century ago, I imagine those guys thought, well, you know, I'm with a good quality woman. This is a woman who is faithful, trustful, etc., right? But you're putting your bet down on. It's not just like, oh, she's still going to be faithful next week. It's like, well, okay, is she going to be faithful in 2 decades' time? Well, how do you know that? How do you know what and like you were just saying? I mean, it's a lot of it's down to societal pressures as well. Well, guess what? Are they going to get less, or are they going to get more as we go forward? I suspect they're going to get more. Do you know what I mean? Because now, if we are seeing this whole sort of eat, pray, love kind of thing of like. You've got to chase the love of your life, and if it isn't your husband, well, he's got to go. That's only going to increase. So when you get shacked up with that woman now, regardless of how nice and sweet a person she is, you've got to think, well, okay, but what are the temptations for her going to be like in 25 years' time, or 15 years' time, or 10 years' time, or whatever? Given that life is not a linear thing, and a lot of shit happens in people's lives. And what you're asking somebody to do is to throw their lot in with you regardless for the long term. And that is, you know, it's anti-human nature. And
it requires a culture and society that enforces that. And the problem is it doesn't. And I think the problem fundamentally with the trad cons and the so-cons, whatever people want to call them, is that they're trying to enforce those norms without the context. And so it's like trying to make a man adhere to the rules of chivalry in modern day, where it doesn't make any sense. And so it's like, you want this to happen, but you're not in charge anymore.
Yeah, well, the old books still linger. I want to get a quick response. Troy, Amos has been jonesing, so to speak, for your answer to this. I threw that up for you.
Yeah, so I'm actually 45 now, which is you know, a terrible realization for me to wake up and realize that I'm that age. How young have you dated? Well, I suppose he means currently. I mean, well, I've always dated girls really in their 20s, to be honest. That hasn't really changed. I've dated a couple of girls in their sort of early 30s. You know, I mean, like at the moment, my girl is she's 27. She just turned 28. But previous to that, I've dated, you know, certainly 26, 25. I dated a girl who was, the year before I dated a girl who was 22, for quite for a lot of the year while she was based in London. So it tends to be 20s. You know, early 20s, obviously, have a certain allure to them. But yeah, I mean, it tends to be that. So my girl currently is, I think, 18 years younger than me, which is kind of interesting. But you don't really notice it. It's not like we're sitting around the whole time going, "Oh my god," this age gap is. It's just. It's just
we have to close the age gap.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's been my. I mean, my challenge it would be to see, because sometimes guys have said to me, dating obviously younger then brings its own issues as well, not related to how we get on together, but related to her life goals, her agenda, what she's going to want, the older clock ticking and all of that. And sometimes people have said to me, well, wouldn't it be better if you dated older women? Wouldn't it be better if you dated older women, because then they wouldn't have those issues? And I'm like, yeah, but the problem is there's a cutoff point, and I'm just not, I'm just not that interested. So, I could see myself sooner going and living in the woods, if that has to become my reality, than doing that. So yeah, no, that's the answer. Like in the 20s generally.
To go with what Troy said, a couple of things I want to add in here. My last serious long-term relationship, she was 20 years younger than me. I met her when I was 42. She was 22. We lasted approximately about 4 years. One of the things that I learned from that relationship that Troy brought up earlier was talking about reality. Okay. Up until that point, I assumed younger women, like that much younger, that drastically younger, would not be interested in an older guy, at least my age. I always figured, they're going to be more into maybe 30 or something like that. And when she opened that door for me and showed me that she wasn't just into me for, say, sex, which is how it started, but, people say, well, what does a 42-year-old guy and a 22-year-old guy have in common? Truth is, we had a lot in common. And other than dealing with society, dealing with people, the friends, the family members, people around us, when I would introduce her, a lot of people assumed she was my daughter because she was young enough to be my daughter. And when I would introduce her as my girlfriend or my lover, people would, they'd shit their pants. Guys would be all like, doing that shit, where the women would be dying, women my age, because, oh my God, you're dating someone that's young enough to be your daughter. But we actually had a lot in common. And one of the big things I learned from her was that if it's possible with one, here's that reality thing, then it's possible again and again and again.
Yeah.
And I keep seeing that over and over since then.
Well, it's something that I've been interested in for a while, because obviously, we're all getting older every day, and it's something that me and a friend of mine, Tom Torero, who's a day game guy over in Europe, but sort of talk about a lot, and he's introduced me to some people. I mean, I'm now friends with a dude who lives in Warsaw in Poland, a British guy who's got a really good YouTube channel called 52 First Dates. He talks a lot about day game and him going out and introducing himself to girls and things like that. And this guy is he is in his early 50s, I would say. And he's a fairly unassuming looking guy. You wouldn't look at him and go, Chad, necessarily. And I'm sure he won't mind me saying that. He's sorry, Alex, if you're watching. But he's dating all of these girls in Warsaw in their early 20s and having a great time. Now, I believe that his I believe that what his end game is to find a relationship and to find somebody to settle down with. Fair enough. But he's certainly, in the meantime, he's having a lot of fun meeting all of these different women. And you look at this and you're like, whoa, this is outside of reality for most people, who think that wouldn't be possible. But it totally is. And, there's another dude we know in Moscow who's living a very sort of degenerate lifestyle, meeting all these different, so people are out there doing it for sure. And I think the whole thing of like, well, what would you have in common is such a it's such a normie traddy type question,
and it really has nothing to do with the what we're talking about, the genuine desire. Actually, have fucking nothing to do with it.
Well, people always say, like it's the sort of thing my mum says to me, like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to meet somebody and you've got those shared memories and stuff. Well, I don't really give a fuck if they want to talk about, they used to watch Blue Peter in 1985 or whatever. I mean, like, I don't really. I mean, it doesn't interest me really. In fact, actually, if anything, I prefer it to date people from different backgrounds. And the other thing is that. So my girl currently has a very different background from me. She was brought up in Dubai, which is, and she's had a very, very different life experience. And I find that really fascinating. I've dated also girls from Eastern Europe and things like this. And, to me, that adds something to it rather than us just sitting around talking about Coronation Street in the 1970s,
Yeah. Yep. No, it's true. I do not date women my age.
Yeah. Can they cook?
Exactly.
My current girl can cook a bit. Yeah, she's pretty good. She horniness is certainly shouldn't be an issue, and that's I guess that's one of the major attractions for it. Sensible. I don't know. I think being sensible can be overrated sometimes, to be honest. Not always. Not always, but then But that's the other thing as well. The dynamic is kind of pleasing, I think, for the guy, because you are that sort of older. You are meant to be the slightly more stabilizing element in that relationship. Not that I always am, to be honest, but it's like if she's not sensible, then you're meant to be there to sort of give a little bit of direction. And I think the dynamic between an older guy and a younger woman is a very nice dynamic, and it's a dynamic that has always felt natural to me and quite nice. To the extent that I've basically never dated anybody who's been older than me. I think I when I was in my 30s, I think I went out with a girl who was like 6 months older than me for a few months, and even that freaked me out. And because I'm sure there are psychological reasons for that. That's something to do with wanting to feel a certain degree of dominance or control in the relationship. But that's just
absolutely
whatever. But anyway, that's my preference.
Okay. All right, gentlemen who are heading out, and people were hello to the people coming in, and hello to the people leaving. You magnificent bastards. Yes.
You magnificent bastards read your book.
That's right. Indeed. So, is there any ready? Let's go back to the geek stuff. We're going to do a 180 here and step away from the whammon for a moment. Writing wise, is there anything you're working on now?
Well, I've got a novel basically sitting in the drawer that I am supposed to be working on. So what happened was I wrote the plan for this novel last year, and I've procrastinated on it massively. I think the reason for that is because I've written fiction before under a different name and so on. And I did a master's in creative writing actually. So I'm sort of it's something I've been quite invested with, and I've always really wanted to write fiction. Obviously, a lot of the writing that I've done has been, about game and dating, so it's been non-fiction stuff.
Yeah.
But I've tried to smuggle in as much memoir as I can. So I tried to smuggle in slightly more, like writerly, stories about my own life and everything like that. But to do actual fiction, is obviously a different thing, and I think part of what is making me procrastinate on this project is that I think because of doing shows like this and obviously having a slightly higher social media profile, I think there's a chance some people are going to read it, and so it's got to be quite good. Whereas before when I wrote fiction, it was just I was trying to get agents and things like that, and it wasn't working, and it was never really going to get read. So there's that. But also I've taken a break from it because I've put together this video course thing which I'm working on at the moment. As soon as that's done though, the aim is to crack into the novel, and I've got the plan all written. So it's just a question now of getting that first draft down, and then going into edits and everything else. Okay.
Now, is it what you call literary novel, a contemporary adult literary novel, or is it more towards fantasy science fiction? I mean, can you tell us a little about it, or is it just still hush hush?
it's kind of slightly hush hush, but it's more it's not fantasy. It's more adult literary contemporary type thing. I mean, basically, it's a little bit of a satire, and I have taken some inspiration from stuff happening. We're seeing happening in the manosphere. I know you don't like to talk about all of that, but some of that stuff has sort of been an inspiration in a way for the story that I've come up with. But it's really interesting. The big thing with fiction is narrative. Really, you've got to get the narrative right, and that's always been the mistake that I've made in the past. To just sit there and just start off and just kind of hope that you're going to end up with something I just don't think it works for me. I think I've got to have the story planned out, because the story obviously motors everything. So I spent quite a long time constructing this thing. So hopefully it's going to work, but let's see how it goes. I'm looking forward to getting into it though.
Okay, that's cool. I appreciate. Thanks for sharing that. That was one of my next questions too, as far as do you, with all of your writing in general, do you pants it or do you do the outline?
Well, so with the non-fiction stuff, I've done a lot of outlining in general, because I think you kind of have to know where you're going, if you like. Because if you're doing it was actually something that Roosh said years ago, that, I mean, like I say, all I really wanted to do, if I could have had my way, I would have just been a dude who sat in my room writing fiction, and that would have been it,
Cool.
It's obviously hard to do that for various reasons. The publishing industry has kind of collapsed, and it got harder and harder to get anything published in mainstream publishing. All of this stuff was happening as I was growing up, and probably I wasn't necessarily good enough to get a publishing deal anyway. And there's lots of different factors that come into it. So what you then come to realize is that actually it's easier to sell non-fiction, and I don't mean that just from a commercial, I want to make loads of money, but just it's easier to get an audience for non-fiction writing. And this is something Roosh said a while ago, because he did a bit of both. He did some fiction, some memoir, and his dating books. And the books that guys want to read initially are going to be the dating books, because they want, because it gives you something, what you're going to get. It says on the cover, how to meet girls. You're like, right, I want to meet girls, I'll get this book. So I went into that, and then so with that, obviously you need to be quite structured. You need to have an idea of what you're going to say. So I did a lot of planning for those. When I was writing fiction before, I've tried different sides of things, and I have done a lot of pantsing, what they call pantsing, which means by the seat of your pants. You don't have an outline. You might have a vague idea of what's going to happen, but you just sit there and start and crack into it. And by and large, those attempts to write fiction have been failures, because this is complicated as well by the fact that I was also quite pretentious when I was younger about this, and I sort of had this idea that, well, plot shouldn't matter anyway. It shouldn't be about the plot. It should be about the language. It should be about the atmosphere you're creating and stuff. The reality is, people don't want that bullshit. People want people by and large want a story. They want for it. And I'm just coming now to the point of thinking, I just don't see how you could ever really just sit down and start writing something, because every single thing that you write, every little description, every little piece of action that you write, should be going towards an end goal. And if you don't really know what that end goal is, then you're going to be screwed, aren't you? Or at least you're going to have to rewrite the whole book when you come to the end of it. So
that's true, yeah.
So, but saying that, if you go too structured, it can be constraining, and then it can feel a bit sort of mechanical. So you've got to try and, I think basically what I'm going for now is having quite a detailed outline, but then going into the first draft and trying to be as free and as free flowing as I can when I do the first draft, and hopefully that brings a bit of spontaneity into it.
Okay, very cool, very cool. Be careful. Oh, that's too funny. All right, so you've got that in the work. You're working on a video project now.
Yeah.
Are you doing any traveling? I know you've done some traveling in the past, and you've mentioned that. Is there anything upcoming for that?
Well, to be confirmed, actually. It looks like there's going to be some kind of event coming up with the Rule Zero guys. So if you're on my email list, and if you're not, do join my email list. I've been sending out a little bit of information about that, so that there's something for that coming up. In terms of other travel, to be honest, it's to be confirmed. I'm quite keen on the idea of getting back to Russia. I've still got a Russian visa at the moment, so quite keen to head back into Russia at some point and do some stuff from there. I mean, I don't know. What would your view be? Do you think that? I think travel makes content more interesting, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? I think a sort of degeneracy on the road kind of thing would be.
Absolutely.
Would like that, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. I to be honest with you, I love that kind of writing. I like doing that myself. I like hearing about that. I think you can interject those kind of experiences in any genre and any story you write. Well, it could be extrapolated.
Yeah, and even just for doing content about dating and about what's happening, meeting women, what's happening on the dating scene and everything. I think there is a lot of value in traveling around. I mean, there's been some talk about going to Poland. I might do something in Poland. Okay. I mean, the great thing is for me or for us being based in London, it's very easy to get around. Even though we've just Brexited, I think they're still letting us in to Europe for the rest of the year. So hopefully, at least in 2020, I can sort of go to some places. I've also, by the way, spend quite a lot of time in Berlin because I've got a place there, and I've got friends over there, and so on and so forth. And Berlin, obviously, is still the most degenerate city. I was just saying that's the degenerate capital of the world, right there. Yeah, I think it still is. I like probably the degenerate capital. I mean, it is literally the seat of the Weimar Republic, isn't it? And apparently Weimar now is a kind of an alt-right. People say, "Oh, that's so Weimar," and they'll mean it's like degenerate. Well, that's a great segue too, because you've got not only do you have like a huge metal scene and goth scene, but you have a huge leather and BDSM scene coming out of Berlin, and have had for decades. So we can segue into that now. So. Yes. Shall I just talk leather in Berlin? There you go. Absolutely. But no, go ahead. The thing about Berlin, right, is I've been going. I mean, the first time I went was in, I can't remember, like the very early 2000s. I think I went and had a pretty nondescript kind of weekend there, and then I went on a work trip in about 2010, and I just fell in love with the place, and I just kept going back, and I sort of made friends there and explored the scene over there quite extensively. And I mean, every time I go to Berlin, I'll go to a club or I'll go to something, and it will just blow my mind. I mean, people talk about degeneracy on Twitter; they just don't. They haven't seen nothing. Do you know what I mean? I just go there and see some crazy shit happening. I'm just like, whoa! I can't believe this is. I can't believe this is even legal. Let alone, no. I mean, I can't believe you just see some crazy stuff happening there, and it's pretty cool. Having said that, it's certainly getting gentrified. It's certainly. I mean, from the places there were 10 years ago, there were a lot of little places that I used to know have sort of been closed. You see them closing down, but even still, it's just got this vibe to it, and it seems to attract very hedonistic people. And certainly there's this massive, like you say, BDSM sort of fetish kind of scene to it. I've got a book actually about Berlin, about Weimar Berlin. Which I've got over there. It was a really good book. Lots of details about the stuff that was going on back then. And at the beginning, it says there was a theory that something in the air in Berlin, like literally something in the air, something like a mineral or something that was in the air, makes people horny. So when they go into Berlin, they start to get a bit horny, and that's why it's become this sort of den of depravity, as it has been for, like you say, for many, many years. Okay, something in the air. I like it. So cool. I do spend a lot of time over there, and that's kind of an interesting place. I mean, it's also a weird sort of mixture because you've also got a lot of hipsters there as well. So it's also kind of a very they've infected Berlin.
Eradicate them. We need to get concentration camps. God.
It's a weird mixture between. There's a lot of it. It's a very liberal place and liberal politically as well. I mean, so you got that. So I know that there are people watching who'll be like, "Oh my god," you have got like literal green-haired lesbians and feminists walking. Like there is all of that stuff, but it's also got this very, as I say, this very sort of like degenerate kind of hedonistic sort of. Crazy side to it as well, and that's the side that I've always found, and the two things sort of coexist somehow. It's weird. So that's what I've always found fascinating about it. Okay. But I mean, do you want to talk you want to talk a bit about the clubs and things, the fetish type stuff?
Absolutely. That's right up my alley. So, and Rob too. And then,
yeah. Did you know there's a street in Berlin called Dickhardtstrasse, by the way?
I did not. That's funny. That's hysterical.
I only discovered it last time I was there. I got a picture of it. Yeah. So, I mean, you've got all of this like BDSM type stuff going on over there.
Okay.
Cool. So there's a club called Kit Kat Club, which has been going probably about 25 years or something. It's like it's been there a long time, and that is it's moved venues a few times. And I've just there's reports recently that the venue they're in might be getting it might be getting taken back by the owners because they want to probably make it into apartments or something. So at the moment, I think they're trying to see if they can stay there. They may try and find other another location. I really hope not, because it's a great venue. But basically, Kit Kat Club is like the main fetishy type event. It's on like 3 or 4 floors. It's massive. You get people going there dressed up in all these crazy like PVC, leather, latex kind of outfits. So you've got that's every week. There's another club called Insomnia, which does a similar kind of a thing across town. There are just somebody's mentioned Berghain in the chat, which is the most famous club probably in Berlin. It's the one that we get reports on the fact that people queue up for hours to get in. You can't get, it's really hard to get in. They'll turn you down if they don't like the look of you. It's a very kind of hip place, but once you get inside, it's like this dark temple of techno. They're playing this like crazy techno music, and by the sides of the dance floor, there's these weird like alcove things, and people are like having sex in these alcoves and all this kind of stuff. It's just completely off the hook. I mean, there's a lot of like nudist places, so you'll go into Kit Kat Club, and there'll be people like just walking around naked. There's dudes like jerking off. Like it's just like there are women wearing like just like panties and things like that. There are people having sex. There are people tying each other up and whipping each other.
Fantastic! I remember in your first book on this, 50 Shades of Game.
Yeah.
You were talking about that, and you mentioned something about being with a girl, and there was like you're behind the curtain, and there's this dude like watching you do fucking this chick, and he was giving you like ratings and stuff over how you were doing.
Well, yeah, I think that was in London. So in London, we've got this event called Torture Garden.
That's it.
Yeah, which has been going for 25 years or maybe more. And it's incredibly popular now. I mean, you go to it. I haven't been to it actually for about a year, but I was a real regular. I was going it's a monthly party, and I was going like every month because what it was. Basically, you would get all of these beautiful girls going to it, and it was incredibly busy. There was one time it was in this really big venue. It probably held about 5,000 people or something, and you get all of these incredibly beautiful girls wearing like next to nothing, wearing these little skimpy outfits and stuff. And really, after 50 Shades of Grey, I think everything like took off, and it became more popular and mainstream, if you like. And you basically go there, and you could. People would be having you could go there, meet somebody, and end up having sex with them within about 10 minutes. It was just that. It was that kind of a thing. It was absolutely crazy. And actually, the good news is that Torture Garden is now starting a monthly event in Berlin as well. So I'm quite looking forward to getting over to see that, because it looks like the venue they've got over there is really good. So I don't know why they didn't do it before. They should have done it before. But yeah, I mean it's this very sexually liberated. Sort of a culture, and for me that was always the interest, really. I mean, I'm not really. I mean, I know you were doing some interesting stuff on John MLD's webinars. Really. To be brutally honest, I'm probably quite vanilla in comparison with that. I mean, I'm not really seriously into the more extreme elements of this. Gotcha. But what I am into is the sexually liberated aspect of it, and I'm basically obviously into meeting the hot chicks who are into it.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be. It's not like you have to be the gimp out of Pulp Fiction. Do you know what I
mean? Not unless that's your thing, then that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. So but I've seen some crazy stuff, and yeah, I mean, what the incident you're talking about, I was in this club in London with this girl who I'd met, who was actually a stripper, actually, really cool girl. She lives in Berlin now, funnily enough, and we'd gone there and we were like, we've gone behind this like alcove, this screen type thing, like almost one of those Oriental Chinese like screen things. And we'd gone behind there, and she was butt naked, I was butt naked, and we were like starting to make sweet love. And she said to me, "Oh, you need to be, you realize that people will watch." And I'm like, "Well, oh, okay." And then I look around, and there's like literally, it was like on a cartoon. There was like 6 faces, like 3 on one side, 3 on the other side,
poking their head around Scooby-Doo style around the
yeah. In the darkness, you could see like the whites of their eyes, like. And this is the thing in these clubs. It's really weird because you can, obviously you can meet girls there, and quite quickly you can take it to sex, because if they're there for fun, you're there for fun, you guys can get together, whatever. But you do have to be aware that people are going to watch. And I mean, I was at another event. What they have in Torture Garden, I think perhaps because of the laws in the UK, they have a special thing called the couples room. So if you want to, whereas in Berlin, people are just having sex all over the place. It's like on the dance floor, people are fucking. It's whatever, on the bar, whatever. In London, in general, you have to go to this couples space, which is slightly, secluded, and you go to the couples room, and they usually make you make out or whatever when you go in, so they can tell you're a proper couple. Then you go in and you can do what you like in there. And you go into this room, and it's just mental. It's like some weird palace of sex. All these people just on top of each other banging. It's really crazy.
Wow.
And one time I took a girl in there, and we were again making the beast with 2 backs, as it were. And this guy was watching. This Brazilian guy's watching me, and he's like, "Yo," and he's like this, and afterwards he's like, "I like the way you fuck. You are alpha male," and all this. I was like, "Well, it's good to get that feedback." And then he was saying that he had this girlfriend, and he wanted me to bang his girlfriend and all this kind of stuff. And I think he turned out to be a bit of a weirdo, but the point is that you have to be you have to be prepared that people are going to be observing you, and and for myself, and this is kind of weird, right? Because as much as I've talked about being an introvert and all the rest of it, there is a slightly exhibitionist side to me as well. Like I actually don't mind that. Do you know what I mean? I actually don't mind kind of just being like, well, I'm
the same way.
Yeah. I mean, again, something that happened with my with my current girl. I mean, again, we were getting intimate in one of these places, and people were watching, and sometimes it can be a bridge too far for the girl, because they don't really want to. Do you know what I mean? They don't really want six dodgy guys watching them. So yeah, but it's a very interesting. It's just a crazy thing. It's very interesting. It's very weird. I'll tell you something else, right? As well. I'm quite a big fan of Depeche Mode. I don't know if any of you guys.
Oh yeah, I've seen them in concert numerous times.
Yeah, so I've always liked Depeche Mode since for many years, since I was like 15. Now in Berlin, at Insomnia, they have a party called, I think it's what is it called? No, it's called Master and Servant. And this party is about quarterly. And Master and Servant is basically a party where they play all Depeche Mode music and people fuck.
Nice.
So you go in there and everyone's like dressed in like their sort of black kind of Dave Gahan style outfits, and then upstairs there's like everyone's like getting jiggy to Depeche Mode. So if you're into awesome. If you're into 80s synth pop, and then that's definitely something I'd recommend.
Absolutely, very cool.
It's just fascinating to me that this stuff goes on, though. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's really, and the other thing about it is as well. So then I wrote that book, 50 Shades of Game, where I talk about this, that whole scene, and then the second one in that series is more about swingers parties, and then the third one is about strip clubs, because just to sort of round out the degeneracy. But
swinger parties are pretty cool.
Yeah. But what I find interesting about those things is that you really get to see an unfiltered version of the sexual marketplace, because basically you're in an environment where it is all about sex, and it's all about, and the girls that go there.
Yeah, there's no hemming and hawing. There's no subterfuge. Just exactly what you're getting.
And the girls there, you know, that not every girl who's there, but girls who are there often go because they want to, you know, they find it exciting. They want to have some quick sex or whatever. Fair enough. And you see the sexual marketplace that we all talk about on these blogs and things being played out live in front of you. And unfortunately, what you see is the dudes, the tall, muscular, good-looking guys tend to be picking off the hottest girls. And then there are guys at the very bottom of the hierarchy who are getting nothing at all. And I've written articles about it. I've joked about this before because in Kit Kat Club in Berlin, there are literally guys who are the omega males of the scene, if you like, who are out of shape. They look like crap. And they will just sit there literally jerking off on a couch all night. You know, they'll just sit there like sort of like watching, and they don't even try to engage because there's just no way that they're going to. There's just no way they're going to get any action. And so you can see the hierarchy from the guys at the top who are getting everything. I've got a good friend in Berlin who goes and, you know, is successful pretty much every week. He's well put together, good looking guy, works out, all of that. Right down to these dudes at the bottom, these kind of weirdo, you know, like perverts, effectively, who aren't going to get anything. And just accept that because they know their place in the hierarchy. And what the rest of us have to do is you're somewhere in between. So you need to, your game needs to be sharp. You need to be, you know, persistent, etc., etc. So it's really fascinating. And I've actually think that I've learned a lot from going to these places for research purposes.
Research.
Exactly.
It's all for science. And I applaud that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I went to Insomnia with this Russian girl a couple of years ago, and we saw some dude. Like I say, every time I go to Berlin, I see some crazy crap happening. And I went to Berlin, and we saw some dude getting put into a black plastic bag thing, like a body bag thing.
The vacuum stuff?
Yeah. So we see the dude being put into this bag, and they're like sucking the air out of it, and so he's encased in this bag, just laying there. And then one of the women takes his member out and starts giving him a blow. They're like dominatrix type women, and they're like sort of whipping him a bit. And then one of the women takes his cock out and starts giving him a blowjob and stuff. And then they I suppose he finishes, and then they just kind of leave. They just kind of wander away and leave.
Just wander away and leave him there. Yeah. Yep, the vacuum beds. Yeah.
I couldn't get on board with that though.
I'll do that to a chick, but that's not my scene.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, you see some crazy shit, but it's fascinating stuff for sure.
Absolutely. So you're more into the, like you said, more into the whole sexual liberation and just like, hey, you know, everything is cool. Let's enjoy each other's bodies, whatever. And it's but not so much heavily into the kink.
I'm not really heavily into the kink, to be honest. I mean, I do quite like being a bit dominant. I mean, I could never see myself certainly in a sub role. I would have to be in the dom. I would have to be in the dom role, and of course, you know, I do a little bit of, you know, spanking, tying up, and things like that. But it's not that I'm heavily into that. It's more, I find it interesting. I mean, I've read various books about it and so on, and the whole sort of control type thing. I read a really good book, the title of which I forget now, but it was all about mental control and all this kind of stuff.
I think it's called The Control Book. Yeah.
I think it is. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I forget the author, but that's a very, very good book.
Yeah.
If you are delving, everyone in the chat, if you are delving into the DS world, as it were, and you are interested in the dominant mindset, as Rob and I were talking about, definitely pick up that book.
Well, the thing about that book is that some of this stuff can spill over into more vanilla type relationships.
Anyway. Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not. Yeah. You know,
it's good in all aspects of life, really.
Yeah, exactly. There is a guy that talks about this, isn't there, on Twitter? I think he's called Tex Dom or something. I don't know much of his stuff, but I think he talks about it.
He's in a conventional. He's in a 24/7 DS relationship, and I believe he's even warned like people who are thinking about that. That's a huge responsibility because essentially the Dom is taking the full responsibility of his sub. He's taking her under his wing.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that is. And that, not for anything, it's not for everybody. So I I do that stuff part-time. I can't do that as a 24/7 live-in situation because
Yeah.
I've come to the conclusion that I can't live with people. I just don't like doing it.
Well,
So.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
that's certainly an element to it. The whole sort of like mind control, 24/7 mind control thing. I mean, that is, like you say, I mean, that is a big responsibility because you're really getting inside someone's head, aren't you? And that
absolutely,
is, you know,
and it behooves you to like not be a complete asshole about it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can if you want. I'm not no moral one way or another. If you want to go be an asshole, go be an asshole. But I mean, that's not my thing. So.
Well, yeah, and you know, I mean, I find all of that stuff absolutely fascinating. But it's not my bag. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think I'm too lazy and preoccupied to
yeah, exactly.
To do that. But I mean, girls do get hooked on this stuff. I mean, I was dating a girl in Budapest for a while. I say dating. I mean, I had this thing going with this girl in Budapest for a while, and she was heavily into that whole scene. I met her in London at Torture Garden, and then I ended up going to an event with her in Zagreb in Croatia, a fetish event in Zagreb, which was quite interesting. But she was completely enthralled to this dude that she'd been seeing before, who she was still kind of. I don't know what was going on. It was a very complicated situation, but she was kind of working with this guy. And he was a dom, and he'd also treated her. He was a bit of a bad boy, kind of arsehole type guy, also. And guess what? She was completely obsessed with him, and even she would see other people. Obviously, she had a thing with me, but the power that this guy had over her was incredible, and actually pretty unhealthy, to be honest. I mean, I wasn't there as her shrink, but you could look at this girl and think, well, that's kind of this is kind of not, So yeah, I find it fascinating, but for me, I think I'm too. I couldn't really see myself getting into that kind of long-term fucked up relationship type thing with somebody because it's too much effort, to be honest.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct.
I'm a bit more avoidant than that, I think.
Yeah, seriously. It's like, I'm going to go read my book. I'm going to deal with this shit.
Exactly.
So, yeah. And TJ, do you have anything to add to that? You seem very...
Not really. No further comment. Are you on
board with any of this?
I'll say what?
Are you on board with any of this murky stuff?
I mean... and I've talked with Vince about this in private. Like, my whole thing is that the reality is women are supposed to be submissive and men are supposed to be dominant, right?
Yeah.
And my whole thing is, when we talk about degeneracy now, I start with, is the man being submissive or dominant? And if the man is being submissive in the relationship, then it's degenerate. It just is. So, there's some stuff I'm just not on board with, but in terms of like hierarchy or priority of like what I am not a big fan of, at the very freaking bottom is the guy who says, I got to check with the wife first before, I unput my zipper type thing and take a piss with the seat up type thing or whatever it is, or the seat down, whatever the hell it is. If there's a guy, it's just, the reality is that women want to be dominated. They want to be submissive, and they're denied that. Men want to be dominant instead of submissive, and they're denied that in our society. So, I'm not saying like I'm a huge fan of a lot of this stuff, but I'm also like, if anybody's got complaints about this stuff, it's like, well, what do you think of what's going on now? Oh, you got no problem with it. Well, then shut the hell up. Like, right. You're part of the problem. When we make it where, because the reality is like the sub-dom whatever relationships is like what 50s wife supposedly was like. So
there is more. There's more to it, but at the basis, you are correct, TJ.
Yeah. So that's all I got to say about the war in Vietnam.
We'll talk again later, Gigi. Don't worry.
That is very true. And I mean, the whole thing, one man's degeneracy is another man's, pleasant Thursday afternoon comes to mind. And it's, I mean, what is degeneracy really? It's veering away from some sort of accepted norm, I suppose. Well,
it's also men. It's men not being masculine and men not being feminine, and in my mind. So when I see men, and I live in the Pacific Northwest, where it's really kind of the vanguard of the degeneracy, as you would say, and I would say degeneracy for me is when men and women aren't adhering to their natural, and I know that that's a loaded word, but there's certain traits that are masculine and men should aspire to be, and there's certain traits that women want and aspire to be, but they repress. And so you see that repression come out with negative emotions or whatever. This is why you see a lot of these feminists, I'm a strong, independent woman who don't need no man, fish, bicycle, and then they're going out doing the sub-dom thing, right? Because they secretly want that, and yet they can't, they're dominant in public, but then they want to go get spanked or beat or whatever in the dungeon. It's like, yeah, you want that, but you won't admit that because you got to put on a front because we live in a society that's screwed up. And then there's the guys that they're hopeless. They're gonna be submissive in public and submissive in the basement because they're freaking
in the basement. Cocks. That's fucking funny.
They're soy boys, like they're hopeless. They're hipsters. Hipsters are the one group of guys who are gonna be submissive no matter what.
TJ's next book, basement submission.
No, hipsters are the guys who are gonna be submissive no matter what environment you put them into. Whereas a lot of guys, it's kind of crazy about. Yeah, I've talked about, like I said, I've talked about this with Vince in private. Like that stuff is like a moral crusade where getting men to be assertive and bold and almost borderline arrogant with themselves, and getting women to be, more gentle and feminine, like that's the way things are supposed to be. And people don't think about that in a moral sense, but it kind of is, because that's what we, whatever you think, however we got to this point, but that's what makes us, I think, the most content. And there's a reason why women are more miserable now than they were back before feminism and the sexual revolution on all that stuff, because they're being taught for 20 years to go against their own biological imperative.
Well, they're taught,
and so are men.
They're taught to be men. I mean, I've always said feminists became the men they wanted to be.
No, especially in the Pacific Northwest, I see the women are acting like men and the men act like women. Like you talk about, how guys are got their spinning their plates. Women spin plates over here. They got their guy, if that, but they've got a couple of guys that they're hooking up with, and then they got the beta orbiters, spinning around them like a moon, like Jupiter, they got the couple moons spinning around them. And I'm just watching this thinking, this is degeneracy,
It's going against the natural order.
Girl out there talking about degeneracy like it's back in the 1980s. It's like, no, we got to deal with this over here. But
yeah,
happen.
Yeah, exactly. That, I mean, that sort of deviation from how things are meant to be is the real degeneracy, arguably. I mean, I don't know, really. I do find the sort of puritanical nature of the Christian right to be somewhat disturbing these days. It's just and very tiresome as well. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit like, if Vincent wants to go on John MLD and mummify a bird, I mean, what's the problem? Like, bit of mummification is fun. Why can't we? Why can't we live?
The other problem with that is that they're trying to please people who are outside of their own group, and I think that's the other problem. Is like, their morality, the morality of religious morality is with the confines of the religion. So if people say they don't believe in your religion, well, then there's no point in having that discussion. That's pointless, because trying to make someone who doesn't believe in your religion adhere to your sexual morality makes no sense. But that seems. But the problem is that they're operating from a 1950s perspective where their morality was also the civic cultural morality, and they don't want to admit that, because if they did, then they might have to actually, I don't know, acknowledge how bad things have gone, how much they've lost over the last 50 years. And part of why we haven't had any kind of real violence in the country, for better or for worse, has been because of the mass denialism and Stockholm syndrome of people who've given up stuff. I've been sending Vince stuff about this stuff goes back to the 50s. So, but it just seems really weird to have someone who doesn't believe in what you believe try to adhere to the morality that's ultimately rooted in what you believe.
Yeah, exactly. It's always struck me as well that there's an argument that monogamy and marriage is the real degeneracy, in the sense that what is our default setting as human beings? Well, it seems to me that our default setting is for the masculine, for the guy to spread his seed far and wide, probably to have multiple partners, etc. I'm not saying this is desirable. I'm just saying this seems to be how we're programmed.
Right.
And it seems that, for women, it seems to be the case that they seek the the highest genetic value that they can get at that particular time. But there's also some evidence that it's better for women to procreate with different guys in order to, because ideally the potential offspring, you want to spread your bets a little bit, don't you? In the sense that if one doesn't work out,
well, even in traditional patriarchal societies where they had polygamy, the understanding was you can do that. You just need to accept responsibility for the woman and the kids, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was, I think that ultimately, when we talk about morality and traditionalism,
are you still talking?
I think that it really comes down to honesty, being honest about expectations and cultural norms and whatever. And our society is fundamentally dishonest about everything. It's dishonest about monogamy. It pretends to think that monogamy is important where it's not. It's only important when you need to get your legal hooks into somebody. But the moment you get your legal hooks into a man, then monogamy isn't important anymore. That's why we have no fault divorce. But in patriarchal societies, I mean, they even kind of enforce that, where they're like, yeah, if a woman's gonna get married to you and you have multiple wives, or you got even when you had a mistress, it's like, yeah, you can give her money or whatever, but you still got to take care of your kids. You got to take care of the mother of your children, whatever. I don't know how much that's being idealistic or romantic, but I think there was this understanding that at least the rules were understood. And I think that that's kind of where the problem is that the rules are either not understood, or everybody's in denial about what the rules are. Because if everybody was open about the rules, then it would cause this massive fight over, I don't know. It's like, I feel like a lot of guys are in denial about what's going on. They deny game. They deny what women are innately attracted to. The rationalizations, I don't know.
Yeah, there is just a general sort of denial of reality, isn't there? Or a failure to sort of stand up to face up to some of these truths about human nature. And if you do try to talk honestly about how you see people and how you see society and how you see the dating scene, then you end up getting called a nihilist, or you get people saying, "Oh, you're so negative," etc. This is the criticism that gets leveled at Rollo Tomassi all the time, isn't it? "Oh, you're so negative, so dark, he's so mean. Why can't you just be nice? Why can't the message be a bit softer?" And it's sort of like, well, I mean, you don't have to throw yourself off a bridge, but at the same time, let's just look at reality. Let's look at how things are, and let's face up to that, and then decide how to move forward.
It's almost like
pretending to be something else.
Yeah, it's almost like living in the trenches in World War One, where not to say it's that bad. It's just you're dealing with the guys where they might die, they might get blown up the next day, they might be gone. I'm just saying, like, it's not nihilistic to deal with the harsh realities of life. And the harsh realities of life is that a lot of what we were raised to believe in, kind of like those guys who were sent off to war 100 years ago, all those conceptions went out the door the moment they got on the front lines. And so I think for men, it's about avoiding the flak and the shell shock, and kind of like, how do you survive the realities of what we're dealing with now? Because we don't know how bad it's been throughout history, but I highly doubt it's been the way it's been now just because of modern technology. And so, if guys have got to do things that are a little weird or odd, it's because that's the circumstances we're put into. And if people don't like that, well, anytime they want to change the laws or change technology, go back to before the internet, we'll be waiting, but we still got to do what's good for us. Like, nobody's acting in our own best interest. So we got to do what's good for us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what I was coming around to saying before is that you could argue actually that the trad formula is the degenerate formula, because it seems to go against natural human impulses, And I think what we're seeing a lot of as well, people have this idea that society is shaping human behavior, that the permissiveness, and to some extent it is, the permissiveness of contemporary society is allowing this monstrous sort of, these monstrous sort of deformations of human nature to come about. But I don't think that's the case. I think that basically human nature hasn't changed very much in the last, many thousands of years. And I think basically, what do human beings really want? Well, they want to fuck indiscriminately. They kind of don't want responsibility. They want, and what we're seeing is not that human nature is changing and becoming more degenerate as we go into the future, but it's just revealing technology and social sort of acceptance is just revealing what was already there, which is actually that we are quite animalistic in nature. And again, if you say that, you get called a nihilist, but that's just how it is, underneath that polite veneer, we have this very sort of animalistic, but bestial side.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that people talk about social constructs, and they're not wrong in some sense, but it's like, yeah, but that's also the difference between the barbarian, the uncivilized, and the civilized. And so I think that the problem is that people just assumed or took for granted that people were always what they were, as opposed to this idea that we got to this point because we built up a culture and society that curbed certain behaviors. And, kind of like with, for example, like the whole sexuality thing, that's very open, but we're also, like, in terms of violence, highly repressed. Like, it's insane how repressed we are in terms of physical violence. The stuff that was allowed just 60 years ago. I read books about kids growing up in the 40s where they would just engage in bare knuckle brawling, and then after they were done fighting, they would just shake hands. It was like, we just got into a fight and it's over. Now you get into a fight with a kid, and it's like you're ready to kill them because it's been so repressed. And so it's just we're such a weird society in the West. I think one of our problems is we're dishonest about sexuality, but we're also repressed in terms of physical aggression for men. We're not allowed to just deal with stuff in terms of physical aggression for the most part. That the only people who are allowed to use violence in any form is increasingly becoming the police, right? And I think I'm personally, I lift weights every day. I'm a big guy, but my fear is always, I knock a guy out and he turns around and just completely financially ruins me because of some hospital bill or something like that, right? Or he sues me because I've got stuff, assets, and he doesn't. Like, you just never know. Whereas back in the day, they're like, yeah, you were a dumb bastard. You got what was coming to you. You know, you got punched in the face because you said something stupid. You know, nobody says anything about it, but it's kind of how I look at our society now. Like in so many ways, we're repressed, and with the whole sex thing, it's more of like people are in denial. Like they're, especially with the whole feminist thing. Like feminists pretend like we still live in a society where like the 50s or something like that. And then they, like, I don't know what to say. It's like, I you know, and it's like on the front face, and it's just saying, yeah, this is the society we're living in. This is how we are. This is what we want. I think that that's the problem with matriarchal societies, is that they have to be dishonest about their desires and strategies, because then men would do what's best in our interests, which is, you know, going after younger girls instead of like what they want, which is, hey, someone's got to marry us when we get into our 30s. I'm like, it's not going to be me.
Well, historically, high value men have always gone after younger women. That hasn't changed.
Right,
I mean,
but like all these narratives, I mean, all these social narratives and all this propaganda.
No, you are. No, I'm not gainsaying
right.
You are correct, but I'm just saying historically, it's nothing new. I mean, that's what I'm
right,
well,
right, and that's what's kind of crazy.
It's just that it's just that it goes back to the natural desire to find the most fertile partner, doesn't it? I mean, it's not. It just is what it is, really.
Right, but one of the social conventions that I hear a lot now is that a woman's sexual peak is like at 30 or 31, and I'm like, no, her desperation to get married peaks at 30 or 31. It's like you gotta keep your head down. If you're a guy who's like an eligible bachelor, or at least you give off that vibe, you got to be kind of careful. So, but
danger zone.
Oh, say what?
Yeah.
That danger zone of the late 20s when they're like,
yeah. It's one second, I got to turn up the volume. It's kind of crazy just how they all these social conventions contradict science and the natural law, because and all the social shaming. I mean, there was Dennis Quaid, I think it was. He's like in his freaking 50s, late 50s, and he's marrying a 26-year-old, right? And every guy's reaction.
God bless him too.
God bless. Yeah. God bless Dennis Quaid. But we're all watching him like,
Dennis.
How did how did he get so lucky? And all the women are thinking, you know, like just
luck had nothing to do with it.
Well, I wouldn't say luck, but it's like we're thinking, we're saying, you know, thank God he's red pill, because he could have ended up like, I don't know, Johnny Depp. He could have ended up like all these other guys who married, you know, he ended up like Leonardo DiCaprio instead of Johnny Depp. Right.
Yeah.
He ends up marrying a girl who gets too old within the span of an Academy Award ceremony. Right.
Or you've got Keanu Reeves, haven't you, with that?
Oh my God. Yeah, exactly. Dude,
what the hell? That was like a shot in the nuts. That one, like, what the fuck?
Like, you know, honestly, they were doing the whole Twitter thing, and maybe this might be a good question to ask everybody here: is where you are and what you feared you would be at. And for me, it's kind of like being the normie, where I got the wife who's, you know, 60 pounds overweight. It's a sexless marriage. I don't get to like, everybody knows what I'm talking about. Like, that is kind of where I look at other men and I say, oh, thank God. You know, like, it's kind of like my nightmare where I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh, thank God. You know,
you're like, oh, I'm single. I'm single.
I'm like, thank you, Lord.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
But other guys didn't end up that way. And you think, you know, so what was with the fear? But the same thing with these guys, where they reached their peak in their lives, like Keanu Reeves. that dude could have the youngest, cutest girl in the world, but he goes for his grandmother, right?
His grandmother.
And then Johnny Depp could have gone for anybody, and he goes for this crazy BPD girl.
He got sucked in by the sex.
Right. And so, which is, throw out some whiskey for him. But I just kind of consider myself lucky that, I've learned what I've learned before that, because God knows it could have happened. Knock on wood,
Knock on that wood there, buddy.
I mean, when I was younger, I always used to be afraid of the idea of being alone. I mean, I was sort of almost functionally an incel when I was in my late teens. I mean, obviously that word didn't exist then, but it was I was sort of there because I was very much like I didn't feel I was able to. Anybody was attracted to me. I was able to meet girls or anything. Now, actually, the reality was that actually there were girls that were interested in me when I was at school. It was just that I tended to just ignore them and go for my one-itis, whoever my one-itis was at the time, and then not get her, and then tell myself this story that oh my God, nobody will ever love me because
exactly. You're like, see, I'm worthless.
Yeah, exactly. But and I sometimes read incel posts, and I sort of wonder whether some of these guys are doing the same thing. Because it's a pose in a way, isn't it? To say, it's like, well, like, okay, I can't be up here, so right, I'm worthless. I'm just unlovable, and that it
becomes their identity and their drive. And
I was sort of doing that. A bit when I was younger, and I've forgotten my point now. But what were we talking about? How did I get onto that?
TJ was rambling about something.
We were just talking about like where we're at right now.
Oh right,
and the fear of
like Vince feared he would be in a old person's home.
So what I was going to say was that at that point, my fear would have been I'm unlovable. Nobody will ever, I'll be alone and all the rest of it. And then as you get older, your fear my fear became the opposite. I was like, oh my God, what if I end up getting married?
Right.
What if I end up, it's really weird how your perspective sort of changes as you get older, because you start to realize actually, what the risks are of that path and the normie path that your TJ's talking about. I mean, yeah, it scares the hell out of me, to be honest. And actually as well, I mean, people talk about their sort of red pill awakening and everything. And I mean, for me, it's a bit more nuanced than that, because in many ways I was sort of, I mean, I watched a ton of 80s movies where the geek gets the hot girl in high school and all that kind of stuff. So in that sense, I was sort of blue pill. I certainly believed that, I certainly thought that was what you had to do. And if you were just open and vulnerable with your feelings, you get the hot girl and blah, blah, blah. And I was disabused of that notion pretty quickly. But on the other hand, I having seen my dad's, obviously my dad divorced, my mother divorced when I was 7, and then he got into this relationship with my stepmother, who was quite controlling and was quite and so I certainly didn't ever have this rose-tinted view of marriage and family either. I was never sitting there going, oh my God, it would just be so wonderful. I remember as a very young kid actually saying to my dad, well, what if I just don't want to ever get married or do any of that stuff? Because it just all seemed like a bit of a nightmare to me, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, it's in a way, my perspective, I suppose, hardened towards that side of things than the normie route. But on the other hand, I don't know. I mean, I think I always had a fairly nuanced sense of blue pill versus red pill thinking.
No. Now, do you ever see your renegade playboy lifestyle ending?
Never.
Living in the mountains.
Same. Never. Fuck
that's right.
that.
That's right. That's what I wanted to hear.
Who knows? I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't think that I can't see myself fundamentally changing as a person. I can't see that my view of life fundamentally changing. I mean, certainly one thing I can say is I'm not going to be taking the God pill and growing a massive beard and sort of
go off the deep
end. What's the word? Rejecting everything that I'd done in the past. It's not to say would I ever. I mean, I think Vince. I think we agree on the.
I think it scares everyone because they're like, well, did anybody think that would happen to Roosh in 2012?
Yeah.
What were we gonna say?
I think there are certain things like cohabitation. I think you've said I think is very difficult. That living together with people is difficult. Marriage is a tricky proposition. I kind of then there's the idea of family and stuff like that. I mean, I'm kind of veering towards the Aaron Clary. I'm sort of veering towards the Aaron Clary on that. So yeah, I mean, I don't. Here's the thing, but regardless of whatever happens, I don't see myself fundamentally. I think the truths of human nature, I think, are the truths, and you can do with that information what you want to do. That's not to say that you can't go down a more traditional route or something if that's what you end up wanting to do, but I don't think there's any point lying about it, and I certainly don't think there's any point in lying to other people about it, particularly if you're putting out content on social media. But for myself, no, I don't think, I mean, my ambition was always just to push it as far as it went, to see how long you could carry on doing the game thing, the player thing, because here's the thing, nobody really does it. Most people retire by about 35, or most people at 35, 40, they get married, they have, and then they start writing books about how they were wrong all the time, and they,
but what
until they get,
them...
and then they get divorced, and then they get back into it again,
Right.
So
yeah, and Rob and I are kind of like at the forefront of new territory here.
Well, it's like the canary. It's like the canary. Yeah, exactly. And it'd be interesting to be that canary in the coal mine to say, well, okay, what does happen? What does happen if you don't throw in the towel? What does happen if you just carry on?
And life only gets better.
I'm 50 and I haven't thrown in the towel, and I'm having the best sex and relationships I've had in my entire fucking life.
Cheers to that. Well, that's amazing.
Let's raise a glass to that shit.
Exactly. And like I say, I mean, I know dudes who are older than me, in their 50s and up, who are doing the same thing. So it's definitely doable. And this is the thing. I mean, all of these changes in technology and stuff. I mean, there are negative sides to it, but there are also advantages for us as well. It's not just a one-way street. Again, I talk about this in this video course that I'm producing, where we've got global connectivity, we've got pretty cheap travel. You can live an amazing life these days.
And very inexpensively too.
Exactly.
Yeah, that is very. Now, can you speak to the video project a little bit, or is that still hush hush as well?
It's not really hush hush. It's just I've been uploading it all because like video files take a long time to upload and all that.
It does, yeah.
It's basically going to be called the Charisma and Dating Masterclass, I think, and it's one of those sort of masterclass products where it's effectively me talking to camera, but there's a lot of detail in there. It goes on for like 10 hours, obviously separated into different modules and lectures and things, and it's there's a ton of detail in there, and I've basically tried to distill everything that I've learned in the space over the last 15 years into this one product. So I start off with a lot of talk about charisma because I've been researching charisma and reading a lot about it, reading some of the scientific studies on it and so on and so forth. So are there ways in which we can learn charisma? Can it be taught? Yes. Spoiler, yes, it can. There are things that you can do to increase that. Oh, sorry. I start off actually with an assessment of the global dating marketplace. So I talk about all of the stuff we've been talking about, the girl in Siberia going to Dubai on the yacht and all that kind of stuff. Assessing the situation as it is and saying, okay, what can we do about this? And then I say, well, what we need to do is to become the best version of ourselves. Then I go into charisma, so how you can come across better, those social interactions. Then I go into the dark triad stuff, so how you can add edge to it. So it's not just about being the nice guy, it's about, how can I dial up the bad boy side of things a bit. Then radical differentiation, how can I stand out? How can I be more myself, more, radically honest in my self-presentation? And then I go into dating and game, and I've got this whole breakdown of exactly how you can go out and bring more girls more women into your life in a way that works. So it's quite a comprehensive thing. There's a lot of mindset stuff, and then there's some real down and dirty like tactical techniques as well.
Gotcha. Okay. And when is this? When do you plan on? You're just waiting to upload everything, or is there an official launch date?
I haven't got the date yet. I'm hoping later this month. Certainly this quarter. But imminently. So I just need to work out how I'm going to do the launch, and then I'll start putting out about it. But it's going to be pretty soon. I'm excited about it. I think it's a very good grounding in pretty much everything you need to know in order to become a degenerate renegade playboy. So
nice. I like it.
What more can anyone want?
That is true. That's all you need in perpetuity.
Exactly. And then after that, as I say, I'm going back to writing because I'm doing a lot of this video stuff at the moment. I'm really concentrating on my YouTube channel. I'm uploading stuff on YouTube all the time, and it's becoming quite addictive. Actually, I'm really into it. But
it's fun. Yeah,
it's really fun. Yeah, it's really fun. It's interesting to think of content, come up with different ways of doing the content and stuff like that. But fundamentally, I still want to do writing. So when I've got the video thing done and out of the way, then I'm going to go back to writing and do this novel, and then maybe some other books and things later this year.
Cool. I like it. Okay. We want to. It's late where you are. I think it's like 4 a.m.
Coming up to it, yeah.
It's coming up 4 a.m. So
I normally don't even come in until this time.
Right?
Yeah.
So we are coming up on the 2-hour mark. Is there anything you want to? Well, first of all, let's do some housekeeping and plug everything that you anything you want to talk about that's you want to get out there as far as your content. Yeah, where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean the main places are Twitter, so it's at the bottom at Renegade Playboy. You can find me there. Very active on Twitter. But YouTube is really the other place at the moment. So if you go into YouTube and just search Troy Francis, you will find my channel. I might be able to put a link in the comments or something. But
please do.
Find my channel and hit subscribe because that I'm uploading pretty much Monday to Friday at the moment. Different, I do a podcast on Mondays. I do usually a scripted video Tuesdays, and then I do a combination of live streaming and other content during the rest of the week. And I'm also obviously on Rule Zero with the guys most weeks on Saturday. And that is sometimes on my channel as well, depending on whose week it is. So you've got all of that. So YouTube is definitely the place. Aside from that, if you want to read my stuff about dating, game, the sexual marketplace, and all of that kinky stuff as well, then get Renegade Dating Blueprint, which is my collection of 11 books on those subjects. It's only $39. I could be selling that for a lot more. So I think it really is a good deal. There's like 5 years worth of work in there. The link is below, so do get on board with that. The other thing is to get on my email list. So I do a daily email Monday to Friday. The link is on my YouTube channel. It's on my Twitter. Go and click on that and join up. It's absolutely free. The good thing about that is if we all get deplatformed from everywhere on the internet,
exactly.
I like to keep that email list as being the real core for people who subscribe to my stuff, because regardless of what happens on any other platforms, I can still get the content out to you that way. So do join up to that as well. And those are the main ones, really. I'm doing a bit of Instagram as well. But, YouTube and the email list, I would say, are the key places.
Those are your two main places. Okay. Yeah, I'm on your email list. I love it. That's part of the highlights of my day. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you were talking about learning charisma. Can you leave our viewers with maybe one or two things they can do to improve their charisma, level up charisma-wise?
Yeah, I mean, there's a really good book called The Charisma Myth by Olivia Fox-Caban, which is really worth reading if you haven't. I refer to it quite a lot in the video course. And what's interesting, actually, is that what she says in that book, a lot of it is down to mindset. Yes, there are external things you can do. So you can improve your body language. You can improve your vocal tonality, the way that you speak, and all of these things. But what she argues is that actually a lot of it is internal, and a lot of it is kind of clearing away the crap that is stressing you out, that's worrying you, that's making you angry or embarrassed or nervous or whatever, so that then you can appear in a much more charismatic, unfiltered way with people. So, there's a lot of different things you can do. I mean, one tip that, let me think of one that I really like. There's one tip that she gives, which I talk about in the course, which is really cool, which is basically if you're in a situation where you're getting stressed out or you're getting anxious or you're getting nervous, instead of trying to get away from those feelings, really delve into the feelings instead. So say you're feeling really annoyed, say you're on a train and you're stuck there for like half an hour and you're like, for fuck's sake, I've got to get to this meeting. Instead of giving into that annoyance, delve into the feelings instead and describe the feelings to yourself almost as though you're a sommelier talking about a fine wine or something. Just, I can feel this, this slight tension raising in the chest and this tightness in my neck, and really describe all of the sensations. And what you find is it really calms you down. It brings you into the moment and it really neutralizes your mood. And then when you go and interact with people, then you've got less of that negativity around you and you're going to come across better. And this is what this is all about, coming across. The other tip that I would give you is something that I always talk about, which is Stanislavski's as if acting method, which is basically when you're in a social situation and you find it intimidating or awkward, like asking a girl out, like going and speaking to an attractive lady or whatever, mentally internalize what the hot Chad guy would do and then act as if you were that guy. And this is what method actors do. So rather
visualization,
exactly. So rather than trying to control every single like little facial movement and every single like body language, posture and everything, because it's impossible to do that fully, instead try to become that character. You just think, okay, I am the hot dude, as John Modern Life Dating would say. I am that guy. I am that guy. And then go in as if you are that guy. And the way that you present yourself will really help to shape the reality around you. So in other words, she's going to buy into that. If you act like that, she's going to buy into it. And then the interaction is going to go a lot better. So acting as if, I think, is a really, really key thing. And it's massively helped me in terms of my journey with all of this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Those are really good tips. They make complete. So, I mean, once you lay it out too, you're like, wait a minute, that sounds deceptively simple. Why didn't I think of that? But
I think it. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the thing with approaching women and dating and so on is sort of about, for me certainly anyway, a lot of it was about my lack of self-esteem and my feeling that I am just not that guy. I know the kind of guy she wants. It's probably Luke Perry off Beverly Hills 90210, which was popular at the time. I'm not that guy, so I've got to be begging for scraps at the table. And what you need to do is reverse that thinking and think, actually, no, I am that guy. Now, objective reality matters less. It doesn't really matter if you're Luke Perry or not. That's not the point. The point is how you act. So what you want to think is, no, fuck it, I am that guy, and go into the situation with that mindset. And then the chances are the results of the interactions you have are going to be markedly better because of the way that you behave.
No, that makes total sense. Thank you for that.
Yeah, not at all.
And Rob's being all silent over there. Are there any tips that you'd like to leave? Anything you'd like to say before we sign off? And where can everyone find you?
Well, they can find me at robsays.net and on Twitter on the banner below. So if they want to find me on Twitter there, they can. Yeah. Otherwise, whatever reality you believe in or that you create for yourself, that's what she will come into. That's one of the things that, going back to what Troy said at the beginning, whatever the reality is that you want, the best way, the easiest way I found was to find someone who's already doing it. Okay. And it doesn't matter who it is. If they're doing it, you can do it too. Okay. When my 20-year age gap girlfriend showed up, she opened up the world to me that, hey, what do you know? If one girl could find me attractive, 20 years difference, then that means other girls can too. And that's when I started seeing all of that. And the world opened up. So all you got to do is find one guy who's doing whatever it is that you want to do. And if you can find them, then that means you can do it too.
Good point.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you control the reality around you, not the other way around. That's
correct.
Absolutely. TJ.
Yeah.
Any tips? Anything you'd like to leave before we depart? Would you like to leave the viewers with?
Yeah, your freedom and independence are the two most important things that you've been given. If you haven't squandered them or sold them out, do not part with them. Just don't do it.
Fair enough.
No. If that requires you to walk down the road with nothing but your meager possessions in a backpack, but you're able to hold your head high, you're better off than a lot of guys who've got big houses, but they go home and they're dreading it because they aren't the lord of the manor. So it's like that's my perspective. It's just everything for me is about freedom and independence.
Yeah.
Agreed. Fantastic. Now, I will go last, and the best thing about going last is all I have to do is say, I co-sign on everything these gentlemen have said, and I don't have to provide any kind of serious lengthy talk. But
okay,
not quite, you little son of a bitch, you. So yeah, everything is really about mindset. Rob and I talk about this in the BDSM Patreon that we have. You have to, and as Troy just mentioned, you have to act, especially when you're first starting out, you have to act as if. All right, your body, how you want to portray yourself, how you want to be, and your body has to be in congruence. Because if you're acting all goofy and shit, and you're going to try to be this dominant man, it's not going to work. And you have to be honest and authentic. It's like, I'll give a quick tip too. As far as approaching women out and about, try going for. I mean, I know you could just walk up to any woman and start talking to her for practice, and I agree with that. Next time you're out and about and you see a woman that you're like, okay, well, I need some practice, but there's nothing about her that's really desire. I don't really desire her. I'm not getting that feeling. I would say don't just leave that one alone. Yeah. Try being in your body, doing what Troy was saying too, especially with feeling the feelings in that moment, especially a woman that you see that you really are like, fuck, you know what? I'm really attracted to this woman. I really want to meet her. Your interaction with her, it may be stilted, it may be a little herky-jerky, but it's going to be more authentic because you're coming from a place of deep desire and attraction for her than if you just walked up and just like, I'm doing this for the fucking hell of it. So next time you're out and about, go ahead and if you do what you want to in that moment. If you really desire that woman over there, go talk to her. If you don't. So, but through all that, keep your mindset.
That is so true. And those interactions where you really desire that girl, they are electric. They are so much more. They've got so much more depth and substance to them than those ones that you do just because you're trying to get the numbers up.
Exactly. And I think you'll find that even though you may not close or whatever you want to call, you may not get the number, you will have more of more of a deeper interaction. And I think that's going to feel better for you. And I think you're going to get more out of the interaction because you're coming from that deep place of desire and authentic interaction. I beat a woman and a guy who weighs like 50 pounds less than me, so they don't count. God love you, John.
That's right.
Yep. So, all right. On that note, we won't belabor the point. I want to thank everyone for coming on. I want to thank Troy for staying up late and hanging out with us. It's been a complete pleasure. That's right.
It's been awesome.
That's been a while since I've done that. Or this. Same thing.
Absolutely. Glad to have you on, Troy.
Yep.
I've read some of your stuff. It's good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys. It's been awesome. Thank you ever so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great.
Absolutely, and look forward to round 2 with you, catching up with your new stuff. All right, everyone in the chat, it's been good hanging with you as well. And until next time, we'll see you later, and keep the fires burning. And don't take any wooden nickels.